Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, ghouls and ghosts, dear listeners, to Fear Boners, presented by the Down in Front podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Abbott, and we're back to talk about some spooky-ass shit this evening. But it's a very special episode. We have two ladies in the house, two witches straight from Salem. It is a Ladies' Night Special Edition Fear Boners, a Lady Boners episode, if you will. We have our friend Maddox, who had joined us recently on the 100th episode of Down in Front podcast for the Infinity War special here, and we also have our friend of the podcast, Chrissy. This is going to be our first podcast with us, so this is very exciting. And as we normally do, we sort of introduce ourselves and talk about what we're drinking, what we've been watching. But in this case, I'm going to ask you guys, what are you drinking currently, and what is your favorite horror movie? Let's begin with Chrissy.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
So I'm drinking this thing that you made me.
I did make it. Yeah. I told you what it was. I didn't give you a mystery drink.
No, it's tequila and something. It's good. And my favorite horror movie, I would have to say, is Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, that's a good one. The original?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I just feel like it's super campy and entertaining and doesn't stress you out during the fact, but the concept is still terrifying enough to keep you up for a week after the fact.
Because you're always going to sleep, or you're going to try to sleep.
Or you're not going to sleep.
Yeah.
But that's, if I were to introduce someone to the genre of horror, I just feel like that's a good place to start.
Start there?
Yeah.
I remember when I first watched that movie, and it did kind of freak me out, because then I was just like, well, shit. I'm going to sleep tonight, and that's when Freddy's going to get me.
Yeah. It's the last time you're ever going to sleep.
Is that the one? Is the first one of those the one that Johnny Depp's in?
Yes. Yeah, he gets sucked into the mattress.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, sorry.
If you haven't seen it by now, go fuck yourself.
But you don't, maybe he lives, maybe he dies, you don't know.
Maybe he ended up in,
The Pirates of the Caribbean.
I was going to say Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, either or.
You know, through the looking glass?
Through the looking mattress?
Yes. Creepy mattress.
Alright, great. And what about you, Maddox? What are you drinking? What are you watching? Or what's your favorite horror movie?
So, oddly enough, I'm drinking the same beer that I was when we did the Infinity podcast. I'm still drinking the No Effects and Stone Brewing Pumpkin Drublick. I have to look at the label because I'll say it wrong every time. When I have time to see it, I'm like, Drunken Punk. No, damn it.
Drunken Pumpkin.
Screwed it up again.
That is weird, right?
Is it? It must be.
I
Like
think
Halloween
Yeah.
pumpkin flavored beer.
People love those pumpkin beers.
It is weird. I really love horror movies, but I still really love The Cabin in the Woods, just because I feel like it itself is a good horror movie, and it's also paying tribute and making fun of so many different types of horror movies and horror movie tropes. So every time I watch it, I'm like, oh man, I love this movie so much, and it has Thor in it. So
True, can't go wrong.
Yeah, pretty much anything with Thor. I don't know if you get to see his amazing.
I think he's topless.
Muscles.
Yeah,
maybe at one point briefly.
Because they kind of try to play him up as the meathead, even though he's supposed to be like a genius.
Yeah, well, that's what makes this character so funny. Is like they make the comment of he's acting like a meathead, but he's writing a full academic scholarship.
Yeah, and he's like making the recommendations on specific history books on like German economics and stuff, and it's like, what?
So it's so good.
Yeah.
Was he Thor at that point?
Yeah.
He was.
He was at least in the first one.
Yeah.
Might even been the second one.
It was. I think only one movie had come out with him as Thor, and I think he
That's
filmed...
all it takes. One movie and you're Thor.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
Not a bad deal.
I think it either got filmed like around the same time or slightly before that Marvel movie. I'm assuming that's how he met Joss Whedon.
Right, yeah.
He did the Avengers, and so Whedon was probably like, I have another awesome movie for you.
Well, Joss Whedon, listener of the show, we can actually follow up with him after and ask him how that happened, how they became friends.
And maybe if he has Thor's phone number, just wondering.
We'll get Thor on the podcast one day. No, I think that's actually the point that Chrissy made, that she would start someone new to the horror genre with Nightmare on Elm Street. I think that like Cabin in the Woods is a good starter too, because you could show them that movie and then be like, okay, what is all this other stuff that it's referencing or poking fun at? And then you can be like, oh, well, this is supposed to be Hellraiser, this is supposed to be Evil Dead, this is supposed to be this, and then you're just forcing them to watch all those movies.
You could use the whiteboard.
Yeah.
You could just take a picture of that and be like, all right, we're going to go down the list.
Horror 101.
Which ones scare you the most?
Yeah. Which one has the, like, hillbilly zombies in it?
Clowns? We'll start with clowns.
Right. Cabin in the Woods is basically the syllabus.
Yes.
That you go over on the first day of school.
Spooky Movies 101. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I am also drinking the same beer Maddox is, but I also have a Boat Swain's chocolate stout.
Swain's?
Yeah, it's a butt swan chocolate stout.
From Trader Joe's?
I found it at Trader Joe's. Is this their beer?
I think so. They used to only sell it in the bottle.
It was cheap as hell. It was a 6-pack for $5. So
yep.
That's me. Cheap to the last penny. And yeah, I would probably say my favorite horror movie is John Carpenter's The Thing, just because it's really creepy and there's a real good feel of like claustrophobic desolation, people just kind of trapped in a situation where help probably isn't coming, and you could freeze to death, but then they throw in this crazy monster, and then the paranoia that it could be any one of them. Like, it's just a great group of things thrown into a movie to sort of just scare the hell out of you. Also, then you get Kurt Russell wearing a sombrero with a flamethrower. There's a lot of really cool things in that movie. There's some cute dogs. Unfortunately, spoilers, they die, but they're cute before they die. And then, yeah, it's just so funny to watch how he remade a real kitschy 50s spaceman movie into this horrifying, like, body horror mutant massacre movie that's well known today for its, like, special effects and things like that. So I usually recommend a lot of people should see it, and then they come back and they're just like, I watched it. I probably won't watch it again because it was just too creepy.
It's stressful.
Yeah.
It is stressful, but...
Yeah, I think, I don't think, now that I think about it, like, it's my favorite movie, but I don't think it's the same, like you guys were saying, I don't think it's a good jumping off point for people. That might be one to get into a little bit later on. It's a little bit
that
more
was
intense.
Definitely one of my favorite horror movies. Did you get the artwork from San Diego Comic-Con last year?
Yeah, with the art book? Yeah.
I was looking through that the other day, and I was like, oh man, that movie was so good, and it inspired so much just creepy monster special effects and artwork.
What year did that come out, roughly?
It was the 80s.
Yeah, okay, I thought so.
Yeah, it had to be early 80s, because I thought that was one of Kurt Russell's early movies.
Early to mid 80s, yeah. I think so. Yeah, I think it was the 80s.
Okay.
Definitely sombreros were still the fashion.
You could tell me anything, I mean, and
yesterday.
I would just believe you. Great.
But they did make that, it was gonna be a sequel, but then it was a prequel a few years back, and that was okay. But yeah, the first one, not even the first one, the remake of the original from the 50s that came out in the 80s, that is technically a sequel to the one that came out in the aughts. Yeah, if that's not confusing, find the one that just says John Carpenter on the box and watch the shit out of it. Thank me later.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Alright, well, I guess we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the episode. Basically, both of these nice ladies had shown interest in being on the podcast, and I said, hey, here's this movie that I found was on Hulu, and I've been really excited to watch. It's a documentary, and I was really psyched on it. And I sort of proposed that we should watch it sort of in book club fashion and then talk about it on this podcast, but we all kind of had similar reactions in that, as far as documentaries go, not the best documentary. And we are talking about Missing 411, the documentary based off the books by cryptozoologist, Bigfoot hunter, policeman guy, David Paulides. If you're not familiar with him, he does deal a lot in the sort of conspiracy sector of things. He was a guest star on Coast to Coast AM, where he talked a lot about the disappearances in national parks and how they could potentially be linked to a government cover-up or something more nefarious or supernatural, and I thought that was really interesting. But I wanted to give a little bit of an outline real quickly, just so you guys both understand and the listeners understand how I came around to thinking that this was going to be an interesting and or spooky documentary, even though it really wasn't.
It should have been.
It should have been a lot scarier, yeah. Basically what happened was I had previously been working a job where I worked weekends, and it wasn't very busy. So I would listen to a lot of creepypastas, and if you're not familiar with that concept, it's basically people on the internet telling, either writing or narrating scary stories. So a lot of these are on YouTube. And I listened to one that was called Horrifying Search and Rescue Stories. It's on YouTube, narrated by a gentleman who calls himself Corpse Husband. I'm sure other people have narrated it, but this is just the one that I listen to. He's got a great voice, makes it super creepy. And it's basically based around very similar stories that David Paulides tells, and it's probably used a lot of that for its base when it was written. And it was originally, the story itself was written by Carrie Hammond, and it was posted to Reddit as a true-to-life story, as if a person who worked for a search and rescue team actually had encountered these strange stories as they were getting trained, or as the longer they worked for it, and were sort of revealing these secrets and these cover-ups and these strange things and strange happenstances. The stories kind of tend to veer into really graphic, brutal, sad zones, and like some of them are really just bizarre and scary and creepy. And so I was really into it, and she kept mentioning the name David Paulides, so I looked into that, found the Coast to Coast AM episode where he talks with George Knapp about different conspiracies and how the government might be covering it up, or it could be Big Feet kidnapping people, and
plural.
Yeah. And then he started talking about the fact that they were making a documentary, which is cool because his books that he also writes and self-publishes are expensive, and then because he self-publishes them, they're published very low print runs, so they're hard to find, so when they're resold on Amazon or eBay, they're very expensive. So I was like, okay, I'll just watch the movie version of these books. So when I saw that it popped up on Hulu, I was like, oh boy! And I got myself a little too excited, and I sucked you two into it.
Yeah,
so,
thanks for that.
That's how we got
you.
to where we are today. And now we're going to talk about this documentary like a bunch of professionals with educated backgrounds and finely tuned research that we have done over the past
24 hours?
few days.
Which I think is more research than they did for the actual documentary, to be fair.
That's true.
It's true. This documentary is going to make you fall down a lot of holes. I would still recommend, watching it, but just keep in mind it is kind of a bummer. People disappear. This movie focuses a lot on children, and a lot of the times either they're not found or they're found dead or in pieces. So warning there, it is a bummer of a movie. But I've talked a little bit too much. Let's get into our sort of reactions going into. What did you guys sort of think when I said, hey, look at this? Would you guys be interested in watching this movie? What were your initial reactions before you watched it and were like, ugh?
I actually was kind of meaning to watch it because I had scrolled past it a couple times, but I was on the fence about whether or not, like, what the payoff was going to be. But I was just like, oh, cool. Abba made the decision for me. Like, I guess I'll watch this.
The box art makes it look really vague as the movie really is, kind of.
Right, but you can watch, like, the trailer on Hulu, I believe. Or
on
maybe it was on
versions
Amazon
of Hulu.
Prime. I have Amazon Prime. Anyway, in the trailer, it looks a lot more compelling, as most things do. All the good parts are in the trailer if you don't want to waste your time.
That's true, so they could just watch the trailer.
And then, like, it's definitely a rabbit hole that I recommend going down. It's not that the topic is uninteresting. I guess that's what made me not like this the most, was that, like, I don't know, like, it could have been so interesting. There's so much to it, and he just didn't really bother with any of the things that were actually interesting about
You just
the story.
kind of find yourself waiting, like, when's it going to get real interesting?
Yeah.
And then it just kind of never happens.
Yeah.
Or, like, towards the end, they start to drop some of those bombs that are like, oh, but what if?
But at that point, I was like, what do you mean, what if? You're proposing a really dumb what if right now. There's a much more obvious answer to everything you said, and you just did like a huge leap to get
Well, what was your initial reaction when I was like, hey, here's this movie, Missing 411, it's about people disappearing and the conspiracy around it?
So I didn't know anything about it beyond national parks, people missing. And I was intrigued because I thought it was going to be more of a true crime type thing, or like a serial killer conspiracy type thing. So yeah,
kinda is. Part of it, a very small part of it.
Yeah, they made everything vague enough where I could.
Yeah.
They never really committed to anything, so it wasn't very good. But that's why I was initially interested, because I go camping and hiking a lot, and I love true crime stuff. So I was like, cool, I could go camping in a campground that's, has a bunch of true crime-ish things. But I don't really give a shit about they think Bigfoot's in the area. I'm like,
but they didn't even mention that. I would have given so many fucks if they had mentioned Bigfoot at the beginning.
Here, Bigfoot, have all
everything
my
was
fucks.
so vague. They just would not commit.
Yeah.
Any.
I had a hard time while I was watching it and hadn't done any other research. I had a hard time drawing connections between all the cases. Sure, they all happened in national parks, but still, I just wasn't able to draw any conclusions as the documentary went. And I think part of the fun of watching things like that is coming up with your own theories about what's going on, and they didn't really give you anything to cling to.
Yeah, the layout of the movie itself, listeners, just to give you a bit of an idea, is you're sort of presented, the movie starts with these little dioramas that show, I guess, crime scenes or, the last known locations of people who've disappeared. And then you get a 911 phone call that's linked to an active investigation that's actually still going of the disappearance of Dior Koontz. And that's sort of the overarching case that's discussed throughout the movie. But then it sort of veers off several times to a disappearance that occurred in the 50s, and then it goes to this other one that happened in, the 70s or the 80s, and then it comes back to the Dior Koontz case, and then it goes back to a 50s disappearance, and then it goes into, I think was there another one that they discussed?
There was one in, the 90s? Yeah, that, in Colorado.
Oh.
There was a little boy, wait, I have his name. Jared.
Yes, yeah.
Whose dad let him go
with a bunch of church hippies.
What's it? No, Christian singles group.
Yeah.
So a Christian singles group that was staying on the mountain, a bunch of people he didn't know, he just let his son go with them. And then he disappeared while he was out with this Christian singles group.
Huh. See, I missed that, because, spoilers, I didn't watch the whole thing. Because I got about 30 minutes into it and was like, this is really dumb and really boring, and I'm getting angry. And so then I started kind of, skipping through. You
have the Cliff's Notes version of it.
Yeah, I basically am missing the middle part, because I would skip 10 minutes, I'd be like, oh, I can't listen to this anymore. And I skipped another 10 minutes. So I think I ended up watching the first 30 minutes, maybe a total of 10 minutes combined at the middle. And then the last, 10, 15. I tuned back in when it was, the old guy who was the one who they found, who they interviewed, and he was like, here are the clothes I wore.
Oh, the old guy that survived.
And it was just this really awkward, 2 minutes
one,
of him holding up his clothes. And I was like, it's kind of weird that you still have those, and you don't seem to be doing anything else.
So you missed the whole part where Christian Mingle abducted a child.
Yeah, I did not. I did not know that is it ChristianMingles.com or ChristianSingles.com?
ChristianMingles.com is the Christian one. And
it was $19.99 though.
I'm assuming that's when they started.
Christian Mingle might have been around. I think we just uncovered another conspiracy.
Yes,
because it definitely wasn't J-Date. It was ChristianMingle.com that made this kid disappear.
So somehow their founding is related to this.
Yeah. Oh man.
Look at that, guys. We are busting fucking mysteries right here.
Took a turn.
We're the Scooby Squad.
I mean, I don't think it matters that you didn't watch the whole thing, because even without watching the whole thing, your stance was that this documentary is actually about bad parenting, from my understanding. And, I mean, everything you missed kind of just supports your theory, so you just kind of put it together without all of that.
I'm glad I had you guys do the homework for me.
Yeah.
We fell down the rabbit hole while you just kind of stepped over it and laughed and look at these dumbasses who got stuck in a rabbit hole.
That's true.
But yeah, again, just to go back to the fact that the narrative of this movie, even though it's not telling a story, it's just kind of presenting facts. And I did air quotes when I said that, listeners, because the one that I had forgotten about, where they do this really great turn where they tell you all this terrible stuff and you're getting ready for them to tell you about another kid that died, and then they have the guy from Survivor Man or one of those shows, and he tells you about, like, how this kid, like, he disappeared here, and he wound up, like, miles later, and he tells you how difficult it would have been, and then he's like, and then they found him. And there's a beat. Alive. And it's like, oh, well, how refreshing. A child that didn't die in this movie. Hooray.
But that guy claims that he doesn't remember any of it.
That's where things, like, get in, because there are other cases that David Paulides has covered where that's a thing that happens, where, you know, and maybe for him, like, he was, 4 or 5 when it happened, now he's 65? I don't remember a lot of stuff that happened when I was 4 or 5
barely
either.
anything.
But there are other people who, and this is where I take it with a grain of salt both ways, where it's like, there are people in some of these cases who who disappeared and were recovered, and they're just like, yeah, I don't remember what happened. And maybe that's because they were in shock, or, like, they had some weird experience, but, like, I don't think it's like they were, making s'mores with Bigfoot or any crazy shit like that. Like,
I think they would remember that.
Yeah. I would hope. Shit. Yeah. I'd get a selfie. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm still glad I watched it, but overall I think the theme is, the theme of bad parenting. Maddox, you had a good call out there if you want to elaborate at all. Like, what were the things that really made you think that these people just kind of...
Oh man, there were so many. I mean, like, the first story is the kid, or, like, they're camping, and they don't seem to know what they're doing camping, because they're at this sort of, like, end-of-the-road campground, which they arrive, and then they have to go back into town to get supplies.
They really stress the fact that it's just really out of the way. It's a short road. It's only, like, 7 miles, but it takes you an hour to drive down it because it's so
it's
shitty.
like a rough
rough
terrain.
But, like, it's not like an actual campground.
It's just middle of nowhere.
It's a dead-end road.
Yeah, dead-end road.
A great place to dump a body.
Yeah, it's just so weird. It's like, so you guys are going out of your way to a super rural campground, which generally implies you sort of know what you're doing and want to do that. And then you have to go back into town to get more supplies that you didn't have.
Like, this wasn't a surprise camping trip.
Yeah. I was like, what? So my guess is they went in for more beer or something. So I'm like, there's...
The main thing, so this is the other... So if you do watch the documentary and you fall into the whole of, like, well, what happened with that case? Because that's the one where it's still up in the air. There is a great website called littlemanlost.com that follows up the story of the disappearance of Dior Koontz and kind of provides more information. The one thing that they went back into town for...
Feminine products.
Tampons, yes.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
There's an interview in the documentary where she's just like, oh, we were fighting like cats and dogs because, like, I was telling him I needed it and he wanted to finish breakfast and this and that. It's like, yeah, but neither of you seem to be at all concerned about where your kid is or, like, what's going on with your kid. And then there's a whole side story about some guy that was at the tampon store that looked at the kid a wrong way.
Tampon store.
When the mom is telling this story to the interviewer, I don't know. They're in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it's just a store that has.
Oh, man.
It's like a cart.
I want to go to a tampon store.
It has a weird name. She gets into telling you, like, what the store was. It's like a package store, basically. But then there's like
tampons.
There's like a place that serves food in the store. Like, they have like a little diner in the store, and she's like, there was a man, and he was looking at my child funny, and so they're like, well, what do you? Can you describe the man? And she ultimately described... This isn't in the movie. This is in the, like, little documentary on littlemanlost.com. And it's so clear that, like, first they're trying to blame it on some stranger that they kind of sort of remember. And then they try to blame it on each other. And it just gets really weird. Because the setup is basically, like, two parents who have this kid that's sort of an inconvenience to them. A very aged... He's not actually her... grandfather. He's technically her great-grandfather.
Wait, really?
Oh.
Yeah.
They just said grandfather in the...
Yeah, they didn't specify that in the documentary, did they? Or did I miss it?
No, so this was again in the follow-up investigation that I watched. And then you just get a vibe that whole family dynamic is a little... Like, her mother seems very young, because you see her mom only a couple times in the documentary, but she's a big part of this investigation, and her mother is very young. The great-grandfather is there. He's on oxygen. He apparently is suffering from some sort of dementia. And then he brings this mysterious friend that nobody really knows.
Right, they had never met him before.
Yeah, and he is a wild-looking motherfucker. And, like, nobody trusts him. Nobody really knows his backstory. And then, like, it's sort of kind of mentioned in the documentary, but it's gone into a little bit further in the investigation that he had a prior sexual assault charge against him.
Yeah, they mentioned that.
Yeah.
If I was a parent, like, I don't want, like, yeah, you might be grandpa's friend, but you're not going to get anywhere near my kid. Like,
did they know that, though?
Whether or not they knew, like, I watched the movie, I watched the documentary, I watched the investigation, I would have, like, a 5-minute conversation with this guy and be like, I'm getting, like, really bad vibes from you.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah.
I know. Also, it's probably worth mentioning that the Dior investigation was, like, the central, like, storyline throughout the documentary.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Everything's
So
sort of sandwiched.
Right.
Yeah.
That's how we ended up down a rabbit hole about this case specifically, because, like, they followed this case from beginning to end in the documentary and, like, laced the other stories kind of in between and never went back to them. I mean, and they never really ended up connecting that much, but I think we all ended up kind of, like, focusing more on this Dior case because that's kind of what the documentary focuses on.
Yeah.
More than anything else, because they don't really, like, ever go back to or update you on any of the other stories that they kind of glaze over.
And I think that's because they probably filmed what they were going to film and then realized they didn't have enough footage for, like, an actual full-length documentary or, like, a feature.
Right, yeah.
And then that's probably when they decided to start doing the dramatic reenactments, which we forgot to mention. Like, that's kind of interesting because it's like, I am a fan of a Discovery show called A Haunting because of their hokey-ass, weird reenactments where they get people who are way too pretty to be the people they actually are. And we get a little bit out of that in this movie, considering how, like, sort of serious the presentation is. It's kind of disconnecting. Was that weird for you? Like, did you think when they said, like, Oregon, 1953, little boy by a river, like, did you think, damn, how'd they get these HD cameras back to 1953? I had a moment where I thought that, and then I was like, oh no, it's a dramatic reenactment. Was that weird for you guys?
At that point, I was already so annoyed with the documentary. I was like, sure, throw in this...
Did you even see that part?
Like, I think that was probably around the time where I started fast-forwarding. So I was like, oh, now you're throwing in these cheesy, like, reenactments. Fuck you, documentary.
I could have gotten over it if they weren't so long. There were just these really long establishing shots where there was nothing happening that would have probably shaved like 20 minutes off of the whole thing if they weren't in there. So I was just kind of like, you don't need to spend this much time on a reenactment. Like, it's not important. Yeah. I don't mind the idea of that as long as it's entertaining. But it was literally, there's one shot of a little boy fishing for like 5 minutes. And I get bored when I'm fishing in real life, so I don't really want to watch that.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting thing they did is that, you know, they try to distract you with the production a little bit. Because at first I was getting excited because they had those little dioramas in the beginning. I thought that was cool. The little interstitial things where they had the footprint maps, which I think are included in the books usually, but they had these weird, almost interactive topographical maps where it would show you the last point the person was seen, how far they traveled, where their remains were found, things like that. That was kind of cool. But then there's those weird... Yeah, there's those weird intercuts where it's like people driving, listening to Coast AM, and like the radio host is interviewing David Paulides, and it almost acts as narration. And it's almost like you're just filling time. This is a gap that you realized you had to fill. Yeah, it's like a little weird, but I don't know. I don't know if they did a Kickstarter for this or like anything like that, but like they definitely had a bit of money because they were able to get the establishing shots that were like really, really nice crane shots and like really helicopter shots and like things looked great, but
the aerial shots were beautiful.
Yeah.
But everything was just too long.
Yeah, like they could have used a little bit more editing. Because how does anybody off the top of your head remember how long the movie?
No,
not
yes,
you.
It was like it was like so
like 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's 30 minutes.
It can be 30 minutes if you want it to be.
It's true. That's why I'm not upset with you for skipping it. Because if this was an actual movie that you would have to sit from beginning to end on, I'd be a little upset but it's a documentary, so you can come in wherever and just kind of glean your own opinion on it.
I mean, we've watched a lot of really terrible movies, and I've been able to make it through them.
It's true. I actually
could not make it through this documentary.
I did.
It was boring. There's not really.
I was looking at my phone a little bit.
Other way to say it, yeah.
I did. I beefed the introduction a little bit, giving the listeners a little bit of a background. The reason why these two witches are here with me is because we have a history of watching shitty horror movies together. So now you finally get to hear our great, great opinions on this shit. And in this case, we start with a fairly shitty documentary.
I'd rather watch Muck again.
Muck was pretty good.
I don't think I was there.
It really made me... Oh, we can rewatch it. It really made me think about... Did I watch... Man Versus with either one of you guys, which was about like a survival man type guy getting dumped in the woods and then he runs into aliens.
So.
No,
it was actually pretty good. I think it's on Amazon.
I'm intrigued.
Well, here's the thing: is that I was dragged like an idiot through this whole documentary.
Wait, did I drag you through it?
No, what's his face?
Oh, David Paulides?
Yeah, it's his fault. I was waiting for the aliens or Bigfoot or whatever, and it just never happened.
Yeah. Okay, good point. Let's get into that. Let's get into how this doesn't really pay off. I know you said, let's start with, you sort of looked into David Paulides' background a little bit and learned a little bit more about him. So can you talk about what you found out about him?
Yeah, so I stumbled across a Vice article about him. And he's just kind of a crazy guy. He has some official title. He was like the first, let me look this up. He's like the original Bigfoot chaser, apparently. He's about 70 years old, somewhere around there at this point.
I didn't realize he was that old.
Yeah,
it's like something that you include in your dating profile. I'm a Bigfoot.
The world's first Bigfoot chaser.
Original Bigfoot chaser.
Let's see. Yeah, so... It says he was the genesis of the Bigfoot chasing movement. He's a self-described law enforcement... What? My notes are out of control.
Is he like Steven Seagal? Does he just say he's a police officer?
What
does
he mean when you're a self-described police officer? Is that it?
I think that just
that was the quote in this Vice article.
You carry a taser, maybe some handcuffs. That makes you a serial killer.
Yeah, so he is Steven Seagaling it.
He works on the North American Bigfoot Search, whatever that means.
I think that's the organization he created.
Right, yes.
Yeah. And he wrote, before he started writing the Missing 411 books, he came out with like 2 really dense Bigfoot hunting books.
Yes, and now he denies mentioning Bigfoot in any of his work.
Oh, really? Maybe that's why he's vague about things, because he doesn't want to go all the way out. He doesn't want to jump the Bigfoot.
So I think that he's just kind of trying to get people to take him seriously at this point.
Okay.
So... I think that's why in this documentary he kind of stayed away from all of that, which I understand. I think at this point he's kind of trying to focus on kind of the moral of the story of this documentary is that the National Park Service keeps no record of missing people.
Yeah.
Like people who go missing in the park, there's no record of that. And he's a big advocate of establishing some kind of database of these people that go missing. And, I mean, I guess in order to do that, you have to, like, stop talking about Bigfoot at some point.
Take me seriously, please.
Yeah.
Here's all this stuff here. These books are still in print of you talking about your lunch with Bigfoot.
And he's straight up denying it, too.
I never did that. Your name's on the book. That's not me.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, people go missing in the national parks, like, okay... Like, I guess I don't really get...
Like, that part gets me a little bit, because, like, we talked about before, the one part, and maybe it was literally just the way that they filmed it or the way that it was presented, they did interview the one guy who used to be Secretary of the Interior under Obama.
Yeah.
And they they're asking all these softball questions, and then they're like, so, is there a list of people who go missing in parks? And there's this weird moment where you look at the guy, and he kind of balks a little bit. Because it's almost like he didn't expect that question, so maybe they told him they weren't going to ask him that, or like they didn't prep him for it, and he was like, boo. Not to my knowledge, no. Mm-mm.
He looked to me like he'd literally never thought about it before.
Yeah.
Like...
Well, I mean, you don't really think about missing until you are missing. You know, like, he's like, I'm still here.
To me, I'm like, I see why he would pause and be like, why would we do that? I mean, it's the woods, it's the outdoors. Are you going to start checking everybody's ID before they go in?
Yeah.
It's just sort of like this idea of, like, why would you do that?
Well, his answer was basically, like, the nice way of saying, like, do you have any idea how many things I have to deal with as the Secretary of the Interior?
Yeah,
he,
how
like,
much paperwork
he
it
didn't
would go
straight up
into,
say that, but he's like, I'm in charge of a lot of shit.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Like...
Yeah, I'm the Secretary of the inside, not the outside.
Right.
I don't care what happens outside.
And like I'm going to the Grand Canyon next year, and all those parks are open 24/7.
Pretty much all you got to do there is make sure you don't fall in.
Yeah,
Stay on the donkey.
Don't fall into that little tiny ditch over there.
Yeah,
just don't do that.
fine.
But like,
No. Go ahead, sorry.
But like, and only one of the places where I'm going to be going, I think it's the only place I've encountered so far where like you have to have a guide to go in it. It's the Antelope Canyons because you go through all the caves because a bunch of people died from a flash flood in like the late 90s, which is a thing throughout those parks.
Yeah.
Like they give you warnings like, hey, you're about to walk through this really nice looking tunnel. In the next 60 seconds, that could become a raging river. So, good on you.
Yeah.
But basically, like, if something happens to you in any of those parks, you're kind of effed. But that's just the way it is. Like, nobody's forcing you to go there.
Hike in a scuba suit, you're fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
I go to Maine to, like, not see anybody, so...
What my high school religion teacher used to say, and it's weird, but he would say, fail to prepare, prepare to fail. So... if you're not wearing a snorkel, you're probably going to drown.
I'm going to be camping all summer. I'm going to be walking around in a wetsuit.
Now, have you been out there before?
Which one?
Grand Canyon.
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm excited.
It's really cool. It's going to sound dumb, but it's bigger than you think it is. Like, you walk up to it, and you're like, this is...
quite grand.
No, you walk up to it, and you're like, this is a painting. Like, it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
No matter what angle you look at it from, like, it's gorgeous. I've flown over it in a plane. Like, I've stepped right up to the edge of it. It's, like, beautiful. So, just don't fall in.
Yeah. My mind's just in the gutter right now. I pretty much have just been thinking dick jokes, like, for the last 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
It's glorious
It's
to look
huge.
at. It's bigger than you think.
Oh, no.
Now, well, one other thing, one of the disappearance, was it they mentioned a disappearance that occurred at Crater Lake, right? Because a lot of this happens in, like, the Pacific Northwest in, like, Oregon.
I think I missed that one.
Yeah, it was that little boy... I think
Jared? Was it Jared?
No, Jared was the one who went with the Christian Mingle people.
But that wasn't at Crater Lake.
No, that was in some mountains in Colorado.
Okay, that's right.
Pages of notes.
I know because I don't know. I can't keep track of any shit, like, in my brain.
Well, no, it's good. This is great.
And also I couldn't pay attention to this unless I was, like, actively
Oh, I was doing the same. I
something.
was literally, like, in my notes app just being like...
Yeah. Crater Lake, that was Samuel Belkey.
Okay, that was one of the ones from, like, a while... Yeah, It was, like, from a while back. Well, I took... Maddox, you camp pretty frequently, and you go on hikes pretty frequently, sometimes by yourself, and you haven't disappeared successfully. So that's great. After college, I took a road trip with a bunch of people that now, knowing what I know now, I probably should not have trusted them with my life. But we camped everywhere, and one of the places we camped was... Well, actually, two of the places we camped. One was Crater Lake, and it was bizarre because it was July. It was warm out, but there was snow everywhere, and I remember distinctly walking around, looking at the crater, thinking about how many people were there. I had the biggest deer tick of my life I had to remove at Crater Lake. It had gotten to be the size of a quarter.
Gross.
So if that didn't kill me, and I didn't disappear at Crater Lake, that just debunks that whole thing. But I could see it as a place of, like, weird... Like, you could easily disappear there, because the way that the roads wind... People are walking around all the time. There are a lot of, like, foot traffic and car traffic, but, like... There's a lot of places you could fall into, especially if there's snow on the ground. There is the crater that you can fall into. But, it is a crater that was made by some sort of astral projection that came down from space. So, that's not ruling out aliens. There might be aliens in the area.
It might be the summer home.
True. If you haven't been to Crater Lake, I do recommend checking it out. The other place that I camped that was sort of odd... was the same place that the Donner Party got stuck and wound up having to eat each other in Truckee, California. And it was...
Oh, shit.
We didn't realize it until the morning we woke up, because we were just like, where the fuck is Truckee, California? okay, it's late, let's set up the tent, okay. And then we woke up and we were, like, 50 to 100 feet away from the Donner Party Museum. And we went in and they had all this creepy-ass shit from the people who, like the evidence they found of, like, you know, here's this little girl's doll we found next to her, like, partially eaten body and, like, stuff like that. And it was, like, all this creepy stuff. And we're like, we slept, like, here? Okay. Is everybody still accounted for? All right, let's go. So if I would have disappeared anywhere...
after you slept there.
True.
You know?
Not knowing would have been was better, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I have also not disappeared successfully, but I also probably haven't camped in, like, almost a decade, I think, maybe. Have you ever camped, Chrissy?
So, not really. I was in Girl Scouts when I was younger, and I had a sleepwalking problem.
Oh, man.
And now that I'm telling you this story, it's kind of like...
David Paulides is going to listen to this podcast and contact you.
Possible theory. So I had a sleepwalking problem, and when we would go camping, when I was in Girl Scouts, like... I don't know, I didn't feel like it was real camping. It was in the woods in Connecticut. It was, like, nowhere very notable. And, you know, we were a mile away from, like, the main facility of the campground. It was, like, no big deal. But there was a couple times when I would wake up in the morning just kind of, like, in the middle of the woods. Because I had, like, slept walk.
Yeah.
Sleepwalk?
Sleepwalk?
Slooped.
I slooped.
Yeah, well, I had unconsciously wandered into the middle of the woods.
Holy shit, that would scare the fuck out of me.
Yeah, so that was kind of like enough. I would go camping again, it just hasn't like really popped up in my life. But for a while I was like, alright, I'm gonna wait until I get this under control.
I think that would have been more terrifying to, like, the girl who found you.
No one found me. I would wake up and, like, just be like, where am I? But luckily, you know, like, we were staying in places where I could either, like, see the tents or see the cabin or see some kind of, like, I never got very far. So I could, but there's that moment of,
you could have
even
tripped,
when
you
when you sleep in a hotel room or anywhere that you don't normally sleep, where you wake up and you have this moment of panic of like, where am I? And that's like a lot worse when you're in the middle of the woods and you don't know how you got there.
I was thinking about it because like a few months back I had, honestly probably because I was drinking too much, which is a thing apparently. If you drink too much you can develop sleepwalking.
Really?
And I would walk from my room, which is I'm pointing 20 feet in the direction to which my room is, out here to the living room and wake up here. And it would scare the shit out of me. Because I knew I didn't black out. I literally just, like, fell asleep in my bed, in my clothes, kind of drunk, and then walk out here and just decide I was sleeping on the couch. That was enough to scare me. If I woke up just in the middle of the woods, I would just freak the fuck out.
Yeah, I haven't camped too much in my life since then.
Do you still sleepwalk?
I don't think I do.
Okay.
No one has, I mean, I've had roommates for the last 10 years, and no one has mentioned anything to me.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I'm just like picturing like you like still crashed out in the woods though, and just like sleeping and like on top of a log or something, and like a girl from the campground like going out for early morning walk and being like, what the fuck?
She's the weird one.
And then you just like springing up and be like, where am I? I would just be like, I'm gonna go back to the campground now.
It's just like Snow White, all the animals land around you.
Yeah, they were just watching over me. I'm like cuddling a squirrel like it's a teddy bear. I don't know. I'm very fortunate that nothing bad resulted in all of that.
It's a good thing you were in Connecticut.
Yeah, exactly.
It brings up an interesting topic. Like one of the things that additional investigation brings up is generally when they deal with disappearances, there's three things that they consider right off the bat. Like an animal attack of some sort, or like an animal was involved in some way, or it is an actual legitimate abduction. Mm-hmm. Someone kidnapped the person or found them and took them. Or it's some sort of further, more nefarious thing. And this is mostly talking about the Dior investigation, where it was like it could be an animal, it could be a stranger, or it could be someone you know. In most cases, it is like someone you know, friend or family. But I was reading other articles to support that where it also included instances of what they considered voluntary or purposeful disappearance. Oh. And I didn't think about that, and I wouldn't consider, like, sleepwalking I think would be, like, a close fifth to that.
Sure,
like, you didn't do that on purpose, but that's another thing that could disappear you.
But I did it by myself.
Exactly, and it was an accident. That could be an accidental disappearance. But, like, purposeful disappearance got me thinking about it, and it's like, well, shit, like, what would that be considered? And, you know, there was all that stuff earlier in the year about, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of the suicide forest in Japan.
Yeah.
That's, like, by Mount Fuji.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
And that is something where people just wander in and they hang themselves or they slit their wrists and they just kill themselves.
Don't even mean to.
No, they do. I mean, they go there to kill themselves because it's such a beautiful, peaceful place. And then hikers go and they find them.
I thought
the movie made it seem like the forest was calling to people, but people just go there to end their lives peacefully.
Yeah, I know. I bought into it. The interesting thing, though, about all of these cases that are mentioned in this documentary is that in almost every case, the kid that goes missing like when someone just looks away for like a few minutes, and this kid is not that far away from the people that are supposed to be watching him. And no one ever hears a scream.
And there's also no, like, that's the thing that ruled out animal attacks, is there's no blood, there's no, like, sign of struggle, like, there's no, that's the weird part of it. But does that not
rule out most things? Because if you're a little kid and even a stranger scoops you up, aren't you gonna scream? Like, that's the thing that's kind of strange about it to me, is that the people that end up looking for this kid are, like, kind of right in the same vicinity. And kids cry over nothing. So, like, why did no one hear this kid scream? Like, is it because they weren't screaming, or is someone lying? Like,
I think in the case of Dior, someone or multiple someones is probably lying about something. But that's a good. There are, like, little inconsistencies like that. Like, there's a part in I can't remember if it's in the documentary, in the investigation, where they talk about the shoes he was wearing. And the one woman was talking about, like, oh, my kid had the same shoes and they fall off super easy. So if he was running, or if someone had picked him up, or if an animal dragged him, like, we would have at least found a shoe.
Yeah.
And, like, even though that's, like, an assumption, it's still, like, a pretty good assumption that they would have found something.
Yeah.
I mean, as someone who goes camping and hiking all the time, it's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, but you never wear shoes.
I mean, that's true, because I don't want to leave behind any, evidence, but, I mean, like, the woods is, like, even, like, the small woods that we have around here are still a big-ass place.
Honestly, if I camped in the backyard out here, I'd probably be scared shitless still.
And, like, I know I've lost stuff in our backyard. I mean, Dahlia's lost stuff back there.
There's wild turkeys out there.
Yeah, I mean, and those guys are savage, so...
Yeah, all these points that they make of, like, the different ways that people, like, legitimately disappear. David Paulides kind of tries to slyly convince us that it's something other. It's, like, another reason that he won't quite explain. He doesn't get into the fact that he's sort of pointing at the government to being to blame. Because there is a point at the end where it does say, like, we asked about this list, we didn't get any response, and then we did contact somebody in the parks services, and they told us if they were to create this list, it would be $1.4 million an endeavor for the government to do that, which isn't a lot of money to the government, but he's still trying to point fingers and he's still trying to make it a thing, but there's still this air that he wants to almost be like, yeah, I'm the Bigfoot guy. I kind of want you to think it's Bigfoot or some other sort of cryptozoological reason that these people are disappearing. There's something out there snatching up people. Maybe Bigfoot's working with the government. Maybe the Chupacabra's working with the government. But he doesn't come out and say it. Yeah. And that's where the end of the movie kind of failed big time for me, because I just watched it and I was like, wait, that's the end of the... It just fades to black, and then you get the little, like, finishing titles that tells you, like, this is what this is, this case is still unsolved, like, whatever. And it felt like an incomplete movie almost.
Yeah, I don't know what the point of the documentary was, because they never argued for, like, any conclusion to any of the unsolved cases. It wasn't like these people are suspicious. It's not like, it seems like you want it off. It seems like it's Bigfoot. Like, they just never committed to anything. They left it super vague, which was...
Well, they were probably trying to avoid I know the people in the big disappearance that they discussed were sort of lawyering up, so they probably didn't want to, like, say one thing or the other.
Yeah.
But it's still just like, why present us with all these other things and not just go all the way? Just be like, it's the government is sacrificing children to gods that live underground, a la Cabin in the Woods, and that's why they disappear without a trace. Just say something interesting. I know it's a documentary, but I still can't take it seriously.
Well, I think at the core of it, too, like, David Paulides was trying really hard to come across a certain way and be like, look at me, I'm totally not crazy, and you should take
legit.
me seriously, when, like, it probably would have been a better documentary if he just, like, really embraced his crazy and went for it. Like,
it would have at least been more entertaining.
Right, exactly. Like, I mean, whether it was good or bad, it would have been, like, interesting, at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think he has anything to say about, like, a logical explanation as to why these people disappeared. I think he thinks it's Bigfoot or something, and he doesn't have any light to shed on it besides that. So he can't make a documentary like that.
Well, I think part of it, too, is, like, the books are very dense, but at the same time, a lot of the reviews I've read on them, and, like, there was a data scientist who disproved a lot of his theories based on, like, the analysis of how he presented certain facts. And some of the examples he gave were like, oh, well, he took these two instances of disappearances that happened in different years in the same area and were, like, similarly documented. They seemed to be similar disappearances, and only correlated them because the two women had three-letter names that started with A. One was an Amy and one was an Ann, and that was his, like, evidence that it was mysterious. Or, like, there was a disappearance where their last seen location was next to a similar berry bush. It was the same strain of berries.
I read that too, yeah.
And it's little things like that where it's like, no, David, you're just grasping at Bigfoot hairs now. Like, it's not...
Well, I mean, he wishes they were Bigfoot hairs.
Yeah.
If they were Bigfoot hairs, he'd be like, I have evidence.
I mean, if anyone is, like, a huge supporter of cryptozoology, when that thing was found a few years back that they were claiming was the Montauk Monster and wound up being like a desiccated dog or like a dead raccoon or something, I was so bummed when they were like, oh no, it's just this.
Oh man, that was hilarious.
Yeah, it looked terrifying, but it'd just been sitting in the river on the beach for too long and, like, sun-bleached.
That's what happens.
Yeah. But I wanted it to be some weird alien thing. I want to believe I am like Fox Mulder, except not nearly as cool or spooky.
And I'm Scully, just being like, no, you're full of shit right now. Stop it. Sit down.
Yeah, I don't know. I think ultimately David Paulides made his Bigfoot books, realized that was a mistake, made these 411 Missing books, has some traction, people eat it up, people are really into it. He's got the backing of, like, the coast-to-coast listeners and, like, conspiracy theorists, but he realizes that books are kind of... I'm not going to go out and say books are a dead medium, but, like, he's making these movies now.
Sure, yeah.
Do you think there's going to be a Missing 411 2? Do you think he's going to make a sequel to his documentary? He's going to make a series of documentaries. Do you think he could do that? Or do you think he would do that? Do you think that's what he's going to do now? He's advancing his medium from book to movie?
Well, there's a lot of opinions on the internet that he's kind of... I don't know this guy. I don't want to talk shit, but there are a lot of opinions that he's kind of changing his position according to what he thinks will get his name out there and what will, like, kind of make him more money.
Yeah.
So I think it's possible that we will see more from him in the documentary world, but the next documentary could go completely in the other direction. I think he's just, like, throwing shit at the wall and trying to see what sticks more than anything. Like,
okay,
that's just kind of my what I gathered from what I read.
That's what I think, because he has a YouTube channel that he advertises on his website too, but it hasn't been updated in a really long time, like mine. But there are like little vignettes of like disappearances, like almost like the precursor to this documentary. There's these little shorts about specific called out disappearances. But yeah, no, I agree. I think if he does make another movie, I think it should be either like commit and go in your face and be like, well, what about the fact that it could have been a, you know, this, or like maybe the government is abducting our children, or maybe it's the Bigfoot. There's a Bigfoot, like a crazy Bigfoot massacre movie that's like apparently doing really well, going around touring right now, called Primal Rage, that I'm like 50-50 on. Maybe that should be the next one we review, but it's basically about Bigfoot running around eating people and killing people. I think David Paulides is going to be the first one in line to watch that movie, but I also think that he's going to be taking notes for his next movie.
Yeah.
Where it's going to be like very factually, and I think that would actually, I love found footage movies. I think it would be great if he takes his experience with Hollywood, air quotes again, and the people he's dealt with to make that first documentary. I think it was his brother, Ben Paulides,
It was his son.
Oh, his son,
yeah.
Okay. Who worked on most of it. I think it would be interesting if they took their experience there, combined what they do with, like, the over-the-top jump the shark factor, and was like, here's this, like, you know, here's the facts, here's these people, interview, Bigfoot, and made it like a crazy monster movie, because I love that shit.
That would
and
be
I would
fun.
watch the hell out of it.
I would watch that.
Yeah, right?
I wouldn't even skip the middle.
Yeah.
Meet us in the middle, David Paulides.
Or don't. Take it all the way. I want to see him just run with this Bigfoot thing. And I think that's...
Running with Bigfoot.
Yeah,
Running
I'm picturing
with
him running
Bigfoot.
in like a meadow of flowers.
Holding hands.
Holding hands and like skipping.
And then, like, trying to hitch a ride. Oh, man. I think we gotta write this movie.
Yeah.
And make it.
It's gonna start with, you know, Chrissy's harrowing Lyft drive over here.
Oh, yeah. Can you tell us about how you almost disappeared on your way over here?
Yeah, I got picked up in a lift at my apartment, a lift line,
Ooh.
if you will, which is like the Russian roulette of ride sharing, and then went on to circle past my apartment where I'd originally gotten picked up 3 times, and made everyone wait for me, so I'm
We
sorry,
got some concerning texts. We were worried.
That was just me being dramatic. I said I was going to die in the lift, but...
Well, we're glad
Here
you
I
didn't
am.
disappear.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, do you guys have any other criticisms or any other feedback about the movie, or where do we go from here?
It was just terrible.
Okay. So we're not giving out any Parent of the Year awards anytime soon, or Filmmaker's Choice Awards, or
No.
Kids' Choice Awards.
None of the awards. Like, even, like, not including the content. Granted, I didn't watch all of it, but the parts that I did watch, the editing and,
Yeah.
like, the shots in it, like, none of it was compelling.
Yeah.
And they would do, like, random things like the footprints. So I was like, alright, so they've got
Right.
sort of some budget, but, like, it didn't quite fit in with everything else. It was, to me, it was like they watched a bunch of documentaries and, like, oh, we know how to do this now.
We're going to make a documentary about other documentaries.
Yeah, and I was like, you guys don't know what you're doing, and this is just terrible.
Yeah. I mean, especially after kind of falling down a rabbit hole on the topic, after watching it, I was just like, holy shit, there was so much interesting information that you could have included in this and you just didn't. And I didn't spend that much time doing research, and I'm by no means a professional, so it's kind of like, why didn't you? Side note, just because I think it would be interesting to get your thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm.
So when I told my boyfriend, like, what we were doing, I have to give him credit because I didn't know this fact on my own. He told me that there was apparently a place in some national park where you could get away with murder because of some issue with, like, jurisdictions.
Oh.
And apparently, I mean, you can get away with murder in a lot of national parks, as
Yeah.
I think we've all learned. But I looked more into that as part of this, which I also just feel like that's one more thing that could have definitely been included in this documentary and was just, like, completely overlooked.
Where was it?
Because it's so easy to find. So there is a legal dead zone in Yellowstone National Park.
What is a legal dead zone?
So here's
My cell
how
phone
it...
won't work there?
Yes. Yeah, because
Okay.
you're dead.
Yeah.
So I have to read this off because, like, I'm not one for political jargon. But basically what's going on in Yellowstone is that the land...
Because I've been to Yellowstone. If I had known, man. Ooh.
It's like a certain part of Yellowstone,
Okay.
not the whole park. So it's like, I guess it's 50... There's a 50 square mile portion.
That's a lot of room to operate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is actually a lot, but I guess Yellowstone is much bigger than that.
In the scale of things, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, under federal jurisdiction, they claim, I guess, like, Yellowstone is classified as being in the state of Wyoming.
Okay.
But under state law, it actually runs across parts of Idaho and Montana. Mm-hmm. But the federal government considers the whole thing to be just Wyoming.
Oh, weird.
So the parts of the park that, according to state lines,
are in other states.
Like, if someone commits a murder there, they can't prosecute it because they can't call a jury.
Oh, shit.
So apparently, like, when people are, like, very smart and somehow know this, and want to murder somebody, they plan a camping trip to this 50 square miles of Yellowstone Park, and they just kill them, and they can't be prosecuted.
There's got to be a movie or like something like that, because that's too juicy. That's great.
Well, I want you to know, I just Googled National Park Get Away with Murder on my phone and found all of that. But
it pops right up.
But now I'm also on a list, for
Me too. Yeah. No, I was thinking that the whole time I was Googling it.
Now you guys are like booking your trip to Yellowstone.
No, but like when I was Googling things, I was trying to like phrase it in a way that I was just curious about it and not actually trying to kill
that probably
someone.
makes you more suspicious.
You're right.
Yeah.
Hey, let's be honest. We're all on some lists. I mean, I was listening. Did you guys hear about how they caught the guy who was like the East Area rapist, the original Night Stalker?
Yeah, I heard about
and
that.
like, so they found him because the government somehow had a tag out there on his DNA, and it triggered when one of his relatives used one of those services that searches your
your DNA.
Yeah. And so they found some of the matches, and then they staked out his house and found him, and it's like, shit, the government can just like, if like my brother spit in a tube and then I
They
did
could
something
find
wrong.
you, yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Have you not watched any like CSI or any other cop drama? They always watch the perp when he's taking like a coffee cup and he throws it in the garbage, and
they
they
fish it
dive
out.
for that.
Yeah, but this isn't that. Like, they got the DNA partially matched from like his cousin or his nephew or something doing like an ancestry match, and they linked it back to him, which is nuts. It's cool. I'm glad they caught the guy. That guy's a scumbag, but bigger and better things. Like, it's all this DNA stuff now that's like kind of coming off, or it's super interesting.
Yeah, no, it is cool.
So that's another reason you could disappear.
Exactly. But like my point is kind of like, I watched Maddox find all the information about this shit while I was talking. So why wasn't that in the documentary?
True.
Like,
we live in the day and age of the internet. Everybody's an expert. It kind of makes it tough to surprise it. But you brought out the topic about the dead zone in the parks. I had no idea. That's really interesting.
yeah, I mean, that's why I give credit. I didn't know about it before. But still, I mean, there's no way he doesn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like he made bad decisions in the course of making this documentary, where even if he didn't want to go full on Bigfoot with it, he could have definitely made it more interesting. The reason I wanted to watch it was because I thought the topic had a lot of potential, and
Yeah.
just didn't.
I think it could have, because like the amount of disappearance cases that he has actually covered, there were probably better ones for him to do in this movie, but he probably contacted the people involved and they were like, no.
Yeah,
No,
that's
we
a
don't.
good
We've
point.
already gotten past the fact that this person's disappeared, and we've accepted the fact that we've lost someone and they didn't want to be involved in this crazy movie. So
Yeah, there's a lot of logistics.
but it focuses a lot on disappearing kids too, which is like, unfortunately,
Yeah.
disappearing children is a little bit more believable and more acceptable, and I don't mean that as bad as it sounds.
Sad, but you can see why it would happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, there's they talked about how there's, like, going back to the 1800s, which when you think of it that way, it's not that many, but there's 1,600 plus disappearances that have been undocumented in these national parks, but they weren't all children. Some of them are adults. And it's like, well, yeah, how did that happen? Again, you can very easily get, like, swatted by a grizzly bear and dragged up a mountain. Like, these things happen.
Or just fall down a trail.
Yeah, that was the other thing that, like, I learned from that creepy YouTube narration where there's these things, are they snowshoots? I can't remember, but when it snows a whole bunch, like on very heavy pine trees, there's these vacuums that form around trees where if you're skiing or you're hiking, you can get sucked into them.
What?
And then the snow buries you, and then, like, search and rescue people do find people basically, like, trapped, frozen, and almost mummified months later when the snow melts, and they just got stuck in these, like, snow death traps.
Because the pine needles probably create air pockets.
Exactly.
They build up, and the snow builds on that, so when you step on it, they actually have...
You fall in, and then, like, the snow falls down, and then you're just trapped. Yeah.
I can see that.
It's like a nature trap.
Ugh.
So, there are things that can just make you disappear.
One more reason not to go skiing.
There's quicksand, there's snow traps, there's just stay at home and watch Netflix. Stay at home, play some video games. Stay at home, record a podcast with your friends. Don't go outside, people. It's overrated.
That's the moral of the story.
Yeah, it's the moral of the story. Well, yeah, I guess if that's sort of our final conclusions on the documentary itself, we can begin to wrap it up. But before we end, I just want to give you guys a chance to let the listeners know where they can find more about you. If you have a hustle, if there's something that you do outside of this podcast. Chrissy, do you want to let us know where the listeners can find you on the internet?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually a photographer. So you can find me on Instagram at lckitesphoto. And my website is also just lckites.com.
Okay, and you do a lot of wedding photography, right?
I do a lot of wedding photography, but, little of everything, editorial, portraiture, but, yeah, wedding season's about to ramp up.
That's what I'm thinking. If any of our listeners are getting married...
Get married, call me!
Okay, great. And what about you, Maddox? What are you doing on the internet these days?
I don't have anything really cool on the internet.
Gotta get on
You
that.
have a dog. You have so many cool
dog
photos.
I do have Instagram, so
you need to make a Dogstagram. Start making that dog Instagram
I should
money.
make one for Dahlia.
Instagram will start cutting a check to Dahlia Al Ghul.
Yeah. I mean, if you really want to see pictures of my dog, my Instagram handle is smaddox42. Sometimes it's pictures of the cat. Yeah.
Also a great cat.
Yeah.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all can.
Yeah, and other than that, I occasionally do podcasts with you and the other guys.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, going forward, I hope you guys can make the time to join us on Fear Boners, and we'll maybe release another Lady Boners in the near future.
Yay!
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for joining us this evening. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you do have any feedback on the episode, or if you have any questions or concerns, or if you're worried that you're going to disappear, whether or not it's through nefarious means, if the government's after you, if the lizard people are after you, the Illuminati, if you're caught up in, like, Thanos' snap, lots of different reasons can make you disappear these days. Feel free to hit us up via email. You can contact us at fearbonersdifp@gmail.com.
Actually, no. You should probably call 911. So.
Well, yeah, call 911 first before you fully disappear, but then shoot me an email and let me know what it feels like to disappear. And again, that's fearbonersdifp@gmail.com. You can also contact the Down in Front guys at downinfrontpodcast@gmail.com. We do have a website that you can find out what we're doing. The most recent episodes that have been released, that's downinfrontpodcast.com. We have a Facebook page at facebook.com/downinfrontpodcast. We have a YouTube channel. You can sort of listen to us on there. Twitch, we have our Games Cast, where we play video games, pretend to be really good at them, and kind of make snarky remarks, and stream on twitch.tv/downinfrontpodcast. We tweet all the time. Sometimes there's polls, sometimes there's funny photoshops, lots of different things to entertain you. You can find us at _DIFP, as in Down in Front Podcast. And last but not least, if you enjoy what you heard, if you want to hear more of it, we do this for absolutely free because we love you guys, we love movies, we love talking, we hope you listen. You can hit us up on patreon.com/Down in Front Podcast, and you can, give us $1 or whatever, Any little bit helps, and that just makes it easier for us to get this content to you as soon as we possibly can. And there are some bonuses for our Patreon contributors, so go to that website to check out more. Again, thanks so much for tuning in for Fear Boners, special Lady Boners episode with guest stars Maddox and Chrissy, and we will be back as soon as possible. Keep it spooky. I never know how to sign these things off.
Keep it spooky.